Hello and welcome. This is Michele Christensen of One Noteworthy Life, and this is episode 2 of Comeback from Burnout. You may notice this is not my usual content. There'll be nothing on OneNote or getting things done or personal organization or anything like that. This will be a lot more personal. We're talking about burnout and specifically my ongoing recovery from a pretty severe case of what is commonly referred to as occupational or workplace burnout. Now, to be clear, I'm not talking about YouTube creator burnout, which does happen. It's just not the case for me. So if this isn't your thing, feel free to click away and I'll see you in another video. I do want to thank people who reached out to me with really kind wishes and supportive messages when I posted the first episode of this. I was a little, hesitant to post this kind of content because it's not my normal thing, but I'm glad I did it. I think it's really good to share this stuff when life isn't going so well. There'll be timestamps below if you want to jump around. So my goal for today is to show you my 10-point scale for measuring where I am in my recovery from burnout at any moment. First, I'll tell you what the scale is, and then I'll show you why I created it and how it helps me. When I was at my worst point of burnout, it was really difficult to find simple, concrete steps that I could take that would help start my recovery. And that's what I'm attempting to do here, to give you simple, concrete, clear things that aren't buried in a mound of other content and information. And that's why I include timestamps as well, so it's easy to find what you're looking for. In episode 1, I gave some history of my situation and a few possible first steps you might want to take. And throughout the series, you'll hear me talk about myself quite a bit. And it's not because I think I'm super interesting. It's because I'm not an expert on this and I don't have any professional certification or anything that I would let me talk about this with any expertise, but I can tell you my own story. So that's why I refer mostly to myself, because I can just share my own experience and hopefully people find that helpful. I also wanted to share what I'm learning in a way that I couldn't really find when I needed it the most. And that's kind of just simple, concrete, accessible, easy to find, easy to digest ideas. So to make sure we are on the same page, I'm using the WHO definition of burnout, and that's in the pinned comment. And I've mentioned this before, but I'm not sure why the WHO specifies that this is workplace, because it can come from other sources. But the WHO definition is that burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as recurring from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It is characterized by 3 dimensions: feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. So that is the WHO definition, and that's the one I'm working with, just so that everyone is using the same definition. So this is my 10-point scale. This is the scale that I've been using to measure kind of where I'm at in my recovery. And on this scale, 0 is I need to check into the hospital. And I mentioned this in episode 1, but I always thought it was just a fake or a cover story when like a celebrity or someone is hospitalized for so-called exhaustion. I really, and not that anyone owes anyone an explanation, but I always just thought it was a fake story. I didn't realize you could really be that exhausted that you feel like you need to be in the hospital. So that's what 0 is. 0 is I'm heading to the hospital. 10 is as good as things could be given my current life circumstances. Now, your life circumstances can change a lot over the course of the long term, like months or years, but I like to look at if everything in my life was optimized, how good could I be right now? And that would be a 10 for me on this scale. So we have 0 and 10, and I filled in number 4, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I think number 4 is where I've been kind of hovering lately, which is why I have criteria for that. So this popped into my head as soon as I first saw that I was burned out and decided that I needed to start recovering. I knew I needed to create a measurement system to see if I was making progress or if I was backsliding. There's some problems with relying just on casual observation of, especially when you're observing your own state of exhaustion or burnout or wellness. We may, as humans, focus on the extremes because they tend to stand out. That's just the way we're wired. We're going to notice the exceptions and the outliers more so than the general everyday fabric. We also may only measure when things are up or down. That's again just human bias. We're going to measure the things that stand out or are different than usual. And we also may focus on more recent times. And again, that's human bias. The closer something is to you in time, the more you might focus on it or emphasize it. There are existing scales out there, but I haven't read or looked at any of them because I wanted to share my idea before I accidentally incorporated someone else's information into it. This just popped in my head and it works for me. It's very simple. So it's what I've been using. And these ratings are somewhat subjective, but in my opinion, it's good enough. It helps me. And for right now, in many areas of my life, I've just been focusing on like what's good enough. When I was really at my worst with burnout, my ability to think and problem solve was very diminished. And to some degree, it still is. So I really am focusing on like simple, good enough. If it works, that's great. So you might want to add some more criteria to this for the different levels, or you may want to consider fewer levels, like maybe 5, so it's easier to slot yourself into one of those. And you could also look at some of the scales that are already in existence to see if one of those would work for you. 10 points just came to me and it's working, so that's what I'm staying with. And I do think the scale is really helpful, this or whatever scale works for you, even though it's a simple idea. So I want to encourage you to adopt this scale or something similar for yourself. Now, at the moment, I'm kind of loose with most of these. I usually just pick a number and I don't think too much about it. But I've been hovering around 4 right now. And my criteria for that is that some of my discipline is returning, like things like going to bed on time, getting up on time, turning off my electronics on time, not postponing things I need to do, stuff like that. It's just like a little bit more discipline. I've also been able to keep myself above 1 for quite a while now, probably for the better part of the last few months. I've been able to stay above 1 for the most part. And that's progress because I really did get down into that 0 to 1 range for a while. So that's how I'm defining a 4. And where I am on this scale varies from, day to day, even hour to hour sometimes. But I would say I've been between a 2 and a 4 for the most part. And also, one of the other criteria I'm using is that I'm handling a lot in my personal life right now. We've been caring for 2 senior dogs. I've had multiple home repairs and projects, multiple paperwork snafus. I feel like that's just kind of the way things are right now. Like when you have to do something paperwork oriented or deal with an organization like a bank or an insurance company or whatever, it just never goes smoothly. So even with all that, I'm still managing to stay, I think, close to that 4 range, usually between 2 and 4. So now I want to tell you how I use the scale. So generally, I just ask myself, hey, how am I feeling right now? Where am I on the scale right now? And it could be, moment to moment, like as I go through the day. It could be like day by day or week by week or over time. It's just kind of whenever and however I need to ask the question. I assess it whenever it occurs to me, like just as I'm kind of going about my day, I might just think about how am I doing right now? I also use it at specific times, like when I need to make a decision about what I'm going to do today. Like say I have a set amount of things I would really like to do this afternoon. I might say, well, I'm close to a 3, maybe even a 2, so I don't want to take on too much. Or, hey, I'm feeling great. I might even be a little bit over a 4 right now, so I'm going to try and get to all these things. And it also, you can use this before or after an activity to see if it helped you recover or if it drained you, and what the net benefit of that thing was. Like, for example, if you want to schedule, say, a massage, if you think that's going to help you recover, that might be a really easy thing for you to schedule if you have a regular place and a regular person that you see. So it takes very little effort to get it scheduled, but it might give you a huge benefit in your recovery. So that might be a great thing to do. And that would be a good way to use the scale to assess how you feel before and after and how much it replenished you. And I'm not recording this or keeping any sort of record at this point. Maybe that'll be helpful in the future. I just don't feel like I need it right now. This is how the scale helps me. So I wanted to just give you a little bit of background. My husband is a computer programmer, and there's lots of useful principles to learn in that profession. And I've learned a lot by observing that. So one of those principles is that in order to improve something, you have to be able to measure it. And in programming, they might make a change to something in the code in order to improve something, like say like a runtime or something like that. There's always a reason for making that change in something that they're hoping to accomplish, and that's usually something that can be measured. So we use this a lot in our life and in our household to make sure we have a way of measuring if we're making progress on things. So my scale gives me a way to measure whether or not I'm improving. And it's been helpful to view my progress over time, because just last year, when I started this process of recovery, I was very close to zero for a while. And I mean, really just skimming the surface of like, I'm 2 steps away from wanting to check into a hospital. And I remember really well, really vividly, what that was like, to just feel like my brain power had compressed down into this tiny little dot, and I was barely able to handle even the most simple of decisions or the smallest of tasks. And now I'm hovering around a 4, and the difference is really striking, and this tells me that what I'm doing is working. So the scale is helpful to view my progress. Point number 2 is that it helps me to see the trajectory, not just the short term. And as I mentioned, we have some biases in our human brains that might make us focus on more recent times. So if you were having a really good or really bad day yesterday, that might feel much bigger than the good week you had before that. But having this on the scale that I'm using on a regular basis is helping me to see the trajectory. And it would be really easy to get caught up in a good or bad moment or day and miss seeing the actual trajectory. And I've improved a lot over the last few months, and so I feel really good having reached a 4. But if I hadn't been following the trajectory, it would be easy to look at that and say, oh, I remember what it was like not being burned out. I'm nowhere near that, and be down on myself. And as an example of watching the trajectory versus a point in time, there was a weekend a while back where we just had a really hard weekend. We were caring for 2 senior dogs, and one of them was having a really bad day. He was really struggling. I couldn't get the medication he needed, and then we had to bathe him. And it was just really hard. We were running on low sleep, and at the moment, I might have rated my state closer to like a 1 or a 2. But once we got everything handled and I got a good night's sleep, the next day I bounced back and I was back up to closer to a 3 or 4. But if I didn't have this scale to be looking at, I could have easily focused on that and just felt like, oh man, I'm so, down, like I can't handle anything. So point number 3 is that you can see how different things move you along. And I kind of referenced this earlier with like the example of a massage, but it allows you to see what's working. If you get to a state of burnouts, things in your life aren't working. The way you're living isn't working. You're expending more energy than you're putting into yourself. And just like money, if you continue to spend more than you have coming in over a long period, you'll eventually have a problem. So something has to change, and there's lots of things you can start with, but it's important to have a way of knowing and measuring what's replenishing you. And that's going to be different for everyone, and there seems to be no set roadmap. As you're trying things, having a way to measure those changes will help you to make choices about what the right recovery activities are for yourself. And then finally, point number 4 is that this scale, gives you a really quick self-assessment tool that you can use short-term in the moment, even just in your mind, to make decisions. Like, I'm at a 3 today. What can I do with that? How much can I do? What can I tackle? And I have this one thing that's going to be really stressful, so I'm not going to do that today. So I tend to just go and try and get more and more done. And then, big surprise, I burned out. Now I'm a little bit more gentle with myself. And by doing this mental check-in and saying, what's my state on the scale? Before I make decisions about what to do, I see what I can fit into my current state instead of just trying to go until I collapse. If I'm out doing errands and I get to a certain point and I start to feel like the exhaustion, the overwhelm creeping in, I might stop and ask myself where I am on this scale and then see what I can postpone until another time. And it really helps me to not overdo it by getting into the habit of doing this check-in throughout the day. So I have one final point, which is that be sure to observe and celebrate and accentuate and enjoy your progress, your victories, all the little milestones, the little wins. I feel like it's so important to note every bit of progress and take time to be proud of yourself, to be grateful for getting to that milestone, and just acknowledge that you're making progress. Making these acknowledgments and really accentuating your wins, your gains, helps keep your progress in the front of your mind, and it will let you enjoy your progress more because you get to enjoy it when you make it, and then you get to enjoy it as you kind of accentuate it and highlight it in your mind. And you might get a mental boost from calling attention to your wins, even if they're really tiny. I've been working on my recovery for about 10 months now, and I'm only at a 4. So I would say that my recovery is coming in really small increments. And if I waited until everything was back to normal, I wouldn't have anything to celebrate or acknowledge right now. So I have really made it a point to acknowledge those small wins, because it could be years before I'm back to that level 10, and I don't want to wait that long before I acknowledge that I've had some success. And I use this principle in many areas of my life. I always try to look for small wins, little things that I can celebrate, small good things that happen, and small successes. The big wins and the big moments in life don't happen often, so I have found that it really improves the quality of my life and my mental well-being by celebrating the small victories. So maybe that's something that would help you too. So that is it for today. That's my 10-point scale for measuring my progress in recovering from burnout. I hope this helps you or someone you know. And I have at least a few more episodes of this Burnout podcast series planned, so if there's something about burnout you want me to explore or a question you think I could answer, leave it in the comments below. If you like this, hit the thumbs up button to let YouTube know, and subscribe so that you're notified when new episodes come out. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day. Bye-bye!